Welcome to ESSEC. For many of you, it is probably the first time that you are coming here. So this is the campus where we have been for the last 5 years. Before that, we have been in the National Library on City Hall, but we are building this beautiful campus here. So here on the campus, you will have students for various programs. So you will have bachelor programs, so they can be quite young for the first year. And we can have people who are coming for the executive MBA, who are senior managers. So we can have a nice mix. So they are going here on the cafeteria, and all of them are mixing. So it's nice to see people of all ages eating together. Concerning today, we will make a presentation about one topic, which is always a very hot topic, which is about geopolitics and business. So this is just to give you a glimpse how we are working at the ESSEC Business School. It is not intended to be a full course. So since we have people who are attending physically this presentation, don't feel free to interrupt or to have a conversation. When we talk about geopolitics, it is very much a two-way conversation because we have people sitting in the room coming from various origins, and they have various experiences, so they can have a very valuable input when we are teaching. On even I have situations where people are sitting side by side for 1 year or 2 years, and suddenly they discover each other during this kind of class, because this is how we are going to talk about sometimes sensitive topics, and they just say, you feel this? Yeah. So they're just discovering this kind of things. So for the geopolitics, I will go back to my presentation, and after that we will have maybe a quick presentation about ESSEC. I presume that you don't know about ESSEC. Who knows something about ESSEC? What do you know about ESSEC? Well, it's a French school. Good. So this is a French school, but this is an acronym, you know? So many people are just wondering, what does it mean? So in a full French way, it means École supérieure des sciences économiques et commerciales. But if you ask any persons who are sitting here, that is from the staff, I'm not so sure that they can repeat in a good French what ESSEC means. Rodel, do you know what it means? No. So it is rather complicated, but we exist for more than 100 years, founded in 1907. Since I'm an old professor here, they told me I'm in the first generation. I said, no, I joined the school later on, so it was a very established school at that time. So concerning the topic that we have today, I am teaching 2 topics within this curriculum. Usually my topic is the first one, which is geopolitics, and I have another topic practically at the end. So in that case, I can see how the participants evolve from the first week they are coming here to the last week when they are finishing the courses there. So concerning geopolitics, in fact, we can have 2 main questions. So the first question, because the starting point is geopolitics and business. This is not an institute of political science. This is a business school. So we have to see what is the impact that we have between geopolitics and business, rather than to talk only about international relations or something like this. So in order to make the connection between geopolitics and business, here you have 2 main questions. The first one is a permanent one, because we can have governments on one side and we have private companies on the other side. It is assumed that governments represent public good, or they represent public interest, especially in a democracy where people are elected in order to represent the public interest. The private company, the term private, means that they are looking for private interest. So usually the private interest will be expressed in dividends, in profits for the shareholders. So this was the usual, let's say, division of work, or the division of power between governments on one side and companies on the other side. Over the time, there was a let's say, a narrowing of this aspect. For instance, the public good, meaning the governments, were closely looking at how private companies operate. So, because what they wanted is to have the efficiency in the government management. So this is why they are looking at how the private companies operate, and maybe they can borrow some of the methods which are coming from the private side. For instance, in the private side, you will very often have the KPIs, which are given to you as managers. So in the governments, they will try to do the same thing. So they will try to measure what is the efficiency of the public servants through the KPIs. So they are looking at what is happening in the private sector, and they want to adapt it in the public sector. On the other side, the private sector has realized that it doesn't work in a closed environment. It is part of the society. So this is why you have the emergence of the corporate social responsibility and the concept of the stakeholder, and not only the concept of the shareholder. So it means that over the time, when we are looking at the situation now in 2020, the opposition existing between the private sector and the public sector is not as strong as it used to be. On top of this, you may have people who are ruling countries representing the public sector, and they are coming from the private sector. So if you are looking at the United States, the President Donald Trump is coming from the private sector. If you are looking at France, the French president also used to work for some time in a private sector. So it means that we have people who are ruling countries who know what is the private sector, and maybe they will be tempted also to implement some of the methods that they have acquired in the private sector, and they will apply it in the public one. So all this to say that in the past we used to have a clear separation between private and public. Today it becomes quite blurry. So this is why we try to negotiate between them. So the question, who rules the world, governments or companies? This is a question which was permanent one, because you may have companies that are big enough in order to say we are more important than countries. So we'll try to see this later on. This is a permanent thing. The conjunctural thing, which is something which is happening today, is to look at what is the biggest geopolitical issue today. And this can vary from one year to the other, or from one decade to the other. So we'll see what is today considered to be the biggest geopolitical issue. So we start with the first one, and after that we'll move to the second one. So concerning corporations and states, we will first try to answer the question, can corporations oppose the states? What does it mean? If the government is asking something to a private company, will the private company obey or not? That's a very interesting question. And we had this in all kinds of situations. So it can be in a military environment, it can be in a civil environment, it can be in NGOs, etc. Will these institutions or will these corporations obey to an injunction which is coming from the state? And we can have several examples. I will just look at one of them. This is a dispute between the United States, or that is one agency in the United States, which is the FBI, and Apple. As you know, in the past we used to have disputes, but the most recent one is when a cadet in the United States coming from Saudi Arabia opened fire to his classmates. And it was a few months back. And the question was that the FBI wanted to recover data from the smartphone used by this cadet in order to find out maybe there are some people who are helping him, or maybe there are some people who would like to do the same thing, etc. So they are asking Apple to cooperate. And they are telling them, look, can you open the smartphone and give us the list of contacts and the messages which have been exchanged by this person? What was the answer? Apple was saying no. So now we have a very curious situation where the government, through an agency, is asking the cooperation of a private company to participate in an investigation considered to be national security, and the private company says no. So we can discuss about is it right, is it wrong, etc. But it is showing how one private company can say no to a government. So after that, President Trump went mad. So he likes to tweet, you know. So it is interesting to see his tweet here. We are helping Apple all the time on trade and so many other issues, and yet they refuse to unlock phones used by killers, drug dealers, and other violent elements. They will have to step up to the plate and help our great country now. Make America great again. I don't see what does it have to do with this, but never mind. So he is always finishing with this kind of sentence. But it means that a private company can refuse. Of course, we can defend Apple by saying they want to respect privacy, etc. But on the other side, the public sector can say, no, you must cooperate, and so on and so on. So it means, but sometimes a private corporation can say, I don't want to cooperate. I'm refusing to cooperate with the government. These companies are sometimes very big companies. So how can we assess how big are these companies? We can have two valuations. The first one is the market value of the company, and the second one is the turnover that this company is making. So the market value of the company is like a virtual value, because this is not the money that they have. This is the amount of money. If someone is buying the company, they have to pay this amount of money in order to get it. So we have very few companies which have crossed the limit of $1 trillion. And Google was one of them recently. So in this very selective club, we have 4 companies. Alphabet is the parent company of Google. You have Microsoft, you have Apple, and you have Amazon. So they are all in the threshold of $1 trillion. So this is not the only company which are crossing it. In fact, the biggest company in the world is not this one. Which one is the biggest in terms of value? Try to imagine. It's not coming from here. It's coming from the Middle East. Yes, exactly. This is why we have the slides coming up. So it will be Saudi Aramco. Saudi Aramco is valued at about $2 trillion. So $2 trillion, it is practically the double of any big valuation that we have in the United States. However, since this company is not considered to be high-tech, it is not present in all your computers, etc., so we rarely refer to this company, but it is considered to be the highest valued company today. However, this is only the value of the company. This is not the turnover. When it comes to the turnover, I will compare 2 things. The first one is the total GDP of one country, and on the other side is the turnover of the company, in order to see how do they compare. Of course, we are comparing apples and oranges because there are 2 different indicators, but we don't have anything better in order to compare companies on one side and countries on the other side. So we look at 2 slides. The first one is looking at the first 50 entities, mixing countries, that is states and companies, and the second slide for the second 50, also mixing companies and states. So this is the result that we have concerning the first 50. The company number 1 will be Walmart. So Walmart from the United States is making about $500 billion per year. The company number 2 will be State Grid. This is the electricity company from China. The third one is Sinopec, fourth one CNPC, both oil companies from China, Shell from the Netherlands, ExxonMobil from the United States. As you can see, there are no tech companies in the first 50. The first tech companies will appear later on because they don't make so much turnover They have great value, but they don't have so much turnover. So here we have the American, the Chinese, and one exception, Shell, but Shell is considered to be Netherlands, but it is a multinational company. So this is the first 50. If we look at the first 50, it will be hard for one of these companies to, let's say, fight with one of the states which are given on the left side, because the states are considered to be more important. Now let's look at the second 50. Which color dominates in the second 50? The red color is for the corporations, and the black color is for the states. So which color dominates? Yes. So who says the black one? Maybe we have problems. So it is the red one dominating, so it means that corporations are more important. We just had a delegation yesterday from Morocco. And this delegation was coming from a very big entity from Morocco, which is the Caisse de Dépôt. So they were present here, and I was teaching to them yesterday. But the total GDP of Morocco is $129 billion. While if we go back to Walmart, it will be $500 billion. So it is more than double the GDP of Morocco. What is the conclusion? If Walmart, let's say the CEO of Walmart is going to Kuwait or is going, let's say, to Hungary, who is the person that he is going to meet? What do you think? It will be only the head of state. He will not meet anyone else, because he will consider that he represents 2 times or 3 times the GDP of this country, so why would he meet someone else? This is also why in some companies you may have leaders who will develop some kind of a megalomaniac approach, because they believe that they are so important, no one can go against them, so they have a sense that they are superior to everything. However, what happens, and this is what Carlos Ghosn has learned very painfully, is that it doesn't work all the time. So it means that when we compare the corporations to the states, of course the corporations here are more important, but after that we can see if it is really the case or not. So the corporations will try to exert their power. And there are 2 ways how you can exert your power, because the states have a monopoly. They have a monopoly on currency issues, on monetary policy, and they have a monopoly on coercive power, which is the police and the army. So if one corporation wants to compete with the state, in that case, this corporation has to destroy the monopoly on monetary policy and the monopoly on the coercive power. So the 2 next questions that we have is, can a corporation have its own currency, and can a corporation have its own army? If you have your own currency and your own army, in that case you can fight directly with the state. If you don't, the only possibility to fight is legal, but it cannot be military and it cannot be monetary. So, for the first one, can you have your own currency? This is what happened in the past, especially in this region here. We used to have the Dutch East India Company in Indonesia and in some other places, and they had their own currency. So this is the currency of the Dutch East India Company, and the coins have been melted in 1602. And for centuries, this company has behaved like a state. They had their own currency, and this currency was more powerful than the currency coming from other states at that time. So it means that it was possible to do it. So the question is, can you have your own currency today? Because all this has disappeared. This company doesn't exist anymore. This currency does not exist. Can we have it in 2020? So, in fact, we already have it. Because if you're going to some parts of United Kingdom, especially if you're going to Scotland, you will find these banknotes. So the question is, who is printing these banknotes? So you have one bank, which is Clydesdale Bank here, and you have the Royal Bank of Scotland. The RBS is a private bank. This is not a public bank. Of course, they had problems, so they have been rescued, but it is a private entity, and they are printing sterling pounds. And the name Bank of England doesn't appear anywhere on this. However, these are pounds. So this is the British currency. So we have this kind of delocalization or some contracting. So the Bank of England is authorizing them to print. Of course, the two banks cannot print as much as they want because the monetary policy is fixed by the Bank of England. But we have private entities which are printing money, printing currency today. Same thing if you are going to Hong Kong. The monetary authority in Hong Kong is also giving the privilege to a certain number of banks to print the banknotes, and this one is printed by HSBC. So you have a private bank which is printing banknotes. So of course they don't decide about the monetary policy, but they are doing it today. But in that case, there is a delegation which is coming from the authority to the private bank. A purely private thing has been imagined. So in France, there is a local designer called Jacques Deloul, and they asked him to imagine the banknotes in the future. So they don't exist. But let's imagine how would they look like. This is the first one. So very important person. 100 units. We don't know what is the bank. We don't know what is the currency, but we have 100 units. So he proposed 3 of them. This is the first one. This is the second one. So this one also very famous, but here the amount is only 50. Third one, do you recognize this one? It's a little bit more difficult. So this one is Roy Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. So this is why you have the golden arch here. Tac, tac, hamburger, McDonald's, etc. But since he's dead a long time ago, we have problems in identifying him. We have, there's, I would say, potential banknotes. The plausibility that it will exist is quite low. However, this is what exists. Today, what is existing is the cryptocurrencies. And for the cryptocurrencies, we have hundreds of them. Of course, the best known is the Bitcoin, etc. But we have hundreds of them, and sometimes even countries are interested in the cryptocurrency, such as Venezuela and some other countries. The cryptocurrency, all of them that you can see here are only private, and they are only based on offer and demand. Do you want to buy them? What is the value of them? And so on. But the cryptocurrency that Facebook wanted to launch, which is the Libra, is completely different, because this one is based on reserves. So it means that they will have like a central bank for Libra, which will back the value of the currency. That's completely different. So for the states worldwide, if you see this, they say this is not a danger for us. But if they see this, this is a danger for them, because you will have a central bank, and this central bank will compete with the other central banks. So this is why they don't like it very much. When Facebook launched the concept of Libra, they gathered so many friends and so many other participants in this, especially this one here, which is MasterCard, or this one here, which is Visa, the two biggest operators in the field. However, over the time, and usually under the pressure of the states, many of them have pulled out. So today, you don't have this anymore. You don't have this one. You don't have this one. If you're looking at this one, PayPal was present, but now PayPal is not present anymore. So it means that the state can accept a large number of things which are coming from the private sector, but when you touch a monopoly of the state, they're usually sensitive about that, and they don't like when you touch this kind of monopoly. The second thing is the army. Can you have your own army? And in the past, we used to have, because the Dutch East India Company or the British East India Company, they used to have their own armies. And they were fighting against the states. They were also cooperating with other states in battles, in all kinds of wars. So this is not a new thing. However, this has disappeared as well. So today, we don't have this kind of private army. So we have something instead. So the first one is the security company. So the security company is all the people who are engaged for the security, either of the condominium, either of the bank, either of any other company, whatever you want. And some of the security companies can be big. For instance, the biggest one is G4S. So G4S, the biggest security company in the world, I just wanted to see how many people do they employ worldwide. So it is very easy. You're going to the website and they're telling you more than 540,000 people. 540,000 people, but the problem is that they're never concentrated at one place at one time. So they're scattered in many countries, and even when we go to a shop and when there is someone from G4S, we don't even register. So this is why we are not aware how big this is. And I compared it also to the active military personnel which is existing today. So G4S would be in the top 10 of the most important active military personnel in the world if, for two conditions, if they were all concentrated on one place and if we are giving weapons to all of them. And as you know, G4S, they are not giving weapons to all of them. You are giving them only when you have to protect something which is very valuable, such as the bank or whatever. But the great majority of them, they don't carry weapons. But if we are giving them, in that case, it will be in the top 10 armies worldwide. The second kind of cooperation is the military contractors. So the military contractors act like private armies. But what is the difference? The difference is that they do not act on their own. They are always engaged by another state. So this is how they're going to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and to some other places. And usually the country employing them is the United States. So you have an American military contractor, and you have the United States. They're employing them in order to go somewhere. We never had military contractors, corporations, who are going on their own spontaneously to some places. So they always have the demand which is coming from the state, except when we talk about mercenaries, or when we talk about what is called the soldiers of fortune. So these people can band together and they're making a private army for the president or for the leader of the company or whatever, but it is rather small. The biggest one that we have is referring to the most famous name, which is Blackwater. But Blackwater has been acquired by another company, so today it is called Constellis. And when we look at the number of people who work for them, we are about 20,000 people worldwide. So 20,000 people worldwide compared to G4S is very small. But the difference is that these 20,000 people here are professionals, meaning military professionals. They are usually former soldiers, and usually former soldiers of the US Army. So they know how to use weapons, they have experience in combat, So that's a completely different environment that we have when we compare to G4S. So in that case, it is not only the quantity, the number of people that we have there, but the quality, and do they know how to engage in warfare or not. So these are the two examples where the corporations can say, we want to compete with the states, but if you want to compete with the state, in that case, you need currency and you need military. For the currency, the states will permit the cryptocurrency, but they will not permit another central bank. And concerning military, you can go there, but only if you are asked by the state to go there. They will not permit that you are going there on your own. So, of course, in many places in the world, we have autonomous armies, we have autonomous guerrillas, so of course they don't ask any permission. But these are not military contractors. This is a completely different environment that we have there. So far, concerning the permanent battle, which is a competition between states and corporations, and now we will look at the biggest geopolitical issue today, which is the trade war between the United States and China. And why is this the biggest challenge? It is because when we look at the situation in Afghanistan, when we look at the situation in Yemen, when you look at the situation in Syria, etc., these are dramatic events, because here civilians are killed, and we don't see what would be the outcome of that. So this is really dramatic. However, from the world perspective, it is still compartmentalized. It means there is no big spillover effect on the other countries, and especially on the world economy. However, if you disrupt, for instance, the supply chain of the Saudi oil, this can have a global effect. But until that time, it will not have a global effect. So unfortunately, it will be dramatic for the populations living there, but there won't be big effect on the world markets. But this thing will have a big effect on everyone. So in that case, we cannot avoid it. This is a big effect, and we have to see how the other countries and how the other companies will evolve. Why is this an effect for everyone? I will refer to one saying given by the late Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, and he was quoting an African proverb about that. And this used to be this one: when elephants fight, the grass suffers, but when they make love, the grass suffers also. So it means that all the other countries, all the other companies are grass compared to China and the United States. And whatever these two countries do, it will have an effect on them. So we cannot avoid it. We cannot say, no, this is only between the US and China, and we are not involved in this. That's impossible. So what is the involvement? The involvement is the following one. I'm just skipping this. The Asian countries, and especially here in Southeast Asia, when they look at China and when they look at the United States, they would like to have the best of the both worlds. On one side, they have military agreements and security arrangements with the United States, especially Japan and South Korea. So it means that they are largely depending on the United States in order to have their own security. But even in Singapore, and it was the latest visit of President Trump here, was the occasion also to renew the military agreement that we have with the United States, especially concerning the Changi Naval Base. So many of the countries that we have in Southeast Asia depend on the United States for their security. And at the same time, all these countries, for all of them, their biggest trading partner is China. So this is where we have a problem. So, of course, no one is asking you right now to choose. But on one side, you have security, and on the other side, you have trade. This is why you would like to have the best of both worlds. But maybe you will not have this opportunity. Maybe the true protagonist will ask you to choose, and that would be a very painful thing. So when we look at them, especially concerning the security matters, things have changed in the United States. As you know, President Trump is putting America first, so he doesn't hesitate to ask his allies in Southeast Asia, for instance, to pay. So this is what he is asking from Japan. Trump asked Tokyo to quadruple payments for US troops in Japan, to multiply by 4. Okay, so we can say this is a negotiation tactic, and we'll see how much it will be at the end. But if you start by asking 4 times, wow, the possibility of negotiation maybe will not be so big after all. So Japan will say, well, that's maybe too much. On the other side, we did not precisely invite you to stay in Japan. So there are reasons why they would say, maybe we don't want to pay for this. Another country, the Philippines, has decided to stop the cooperation with the United States. So it means that from the security point of view, of course, having the United States to back your security is like a safety net for many of these countries, but situations can change in the United States. Many of these countries are still wondering, is the American backing or the American support indefectible, or maybe we have to see other options and to imagine other options. The second thing is the trade. So concerning the trade, on this chart you can see how the trade has shifted from the United States to China. So when you look at the red arrow, it shows how it has shifted from America to China. And if you are looking at the blue arrow, it is shifting from China to the United States. And there is a red, the red color is dominating it. So it means that for many of these countries here, there was a significant shift from the United States to China. And when you embark on this shift, it is very hard to go back, except in unforeseen circumstances, such as the coronavirus, which is stopping everything. But if we don't have this kind of force majeure approach, in that case, they would probably not go back in order to shift on the opposite side. So this shift is very important, and I will invite you to look at this website, which is called How Much. And this website is very interesting because they are giving you plenty of interactive information about the economic situation worldwide, and they also have this time lapse. So the time lapse is showing how it has shifted from the United States to China for the last, let's say, 40 years. So it is starting in 1980 and it is stopping in 2018. So when you're looking at this year, 1984, you will have the blue color dominating. But if you look at the year 2018, the red color dominates worldwide. So these are tectonic changes. This is very important changes. When you have to fight against China, you will think twice because it is still your most important trading partner. So if you have to choose, this is what they have asked the Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. It was in October. The interviewer is Fareed Zakaria. He is very famous, an anchor appearing on TV. And he is asking, I would say, a direct question. So the direct question was, if you have to choose between China and the US, what will you do? What was the answer? It will be painful. So that was the answer which has been given by the Prime Minister. And if you ask any country in Southeast Asia, it will be the same, except Some countries which are closely associated to China, such as Myanmar, for instance, for them there is no discussion. But for all the others, there would be a discussion, and they practically don't know what will happen there. So this is for the why is this very important. Of course, why did they start a trade war? It was a deficit concerning the trade balance between the United States and China. And from the Trump's point of view, in fact, he doesn't blame China. This is not a problem for him. He always says that he respects the Chinese people, etc. Okay. So what he blames is the multilateral organizations, such as the WTO, which have permitted China to have this position today. So he doesn't blame China. He blames indirectly his predecessors who permitted in the WTO to give such a big presence for China. And the most important date for that is the year of accession of China to the WTO, which is in 2001. So this year is the most important one, which has given so much room for China to be present today. So, of course, today we have this big trade war between them, but what Trump is saying, that's not the fault of China. It is probably the fault of the United States to have permitted this. So the consequence of this trade war between these two giants is given here. 4 terms. The first one is deglobalization. The second one is reshoring. The third one is decoupling. And the last one is bifurcation. So these are the 4 words which practically did not exist 5 years ago. But today, because of the action and initiative coming from the United States, they have become very important terms. So we will look at the 4 of them, and after that we'll open the floor for questions and answers. The first one is deglobalization. Until 2016, there was a widespread feeling that the globalization movement is irreversible and irresistible. We cannot stop globalization. We will always have new countries entering globalization. We will have new ways how to integrate different economies. It will never stop. Second thing, we cannot come back. We cannot pull out. So this was the general feeling until 2016. This year is annus horribilis for globalization because of the election of Trump and Brexit. So it has shown that it is not irresistible, and it has shown that it is not irreversible. So this is why, for many states in the world, and even corporations, they're a little bit lost because they cannot predict what may happen. 5 years ago, it was predictable. Globalization will continue. So we have to prepare for that. But today, it is no more the case. So Trump is fighting against the WTO. How is he fighting against the WTO? On 2 grounds. The first one, within the WTO, you have 3 groups of countries. You have the developed countries, you have the developing countries, and you have the least developed countries. And if you're in the category of developing or in the category of least developed countries, you enjoy some facilities. For instance, you can protect some of your industries, you can give subsidies, and so on and so on. So from Trump's point of view, the problem is who is in the list of the developed, developing, and least developed. And when he is looking at the list, he is becoming mad. Well, he becomes mad very often, but when he is looking at this one, he's saying, that's not possible. Do you know who is in the list of developing countries? You will find China, but you will find also Singapore. Singapore is in the list of developing countries. So Trump is saying, how come? how come that Hong Kong is in the list of the developing countries? So he's saying that's impossible. We have to change something. So he asked his advisors, who fixes the list? And they are saying, well, if you look at the website of the WTO, it is mentioned here. There are no WTO definitions of developed and developing countries. Members announce for themselves whether they are developed or developing. And Trump says, what is this mess? We cannot accept this. So he has drawn this list, for instance here, the countries which are all developing economies. So you will find South Korea, Hong Kong, Mexico, Singapore, United Arab Emirates. All this is developing, according to the list which is given by the WTO. So Trump is saying, no, we have to change. But if you want to change, you have to change the rules of the WTO. And here, America cannot do everything. So this is one thing that he doesn't like about the WTO. He believes that there is unfair retribution to some countries which should not be in this list. And he's also giving this list here, OECD member, G20 member, high income country per World Bank definition. You have so many of them in the list of the developing countries. So this is one thing that he doesn't like about the WTO. The second thing is concerning the disputes. Well, America has many disputes. For instance, today we have 253 disputes before the WTO because the United States have announced unilaterally a certain number on tariffs in order to protect their industry, such as aluminum or whatever. So we have 253 disputes. China is concerned with 55 of these disputes. So if you are going to a dispute at the WTO, you first have a panel. So this panel is hearing the dispute. If they cannot resolve the dispute, they are going to the appellate body. And this appellate body is making a decision. So what is happening today is that in the appellate body, 4 posts are vacant, and these 2 have expired. So we have just 1 member of the appellate body that can work. But in order to make a decision, you need at least 3 of them. And the United States is blocking the election of new members in the appellate body. So they are blocking the work of the WTO because they believe that the appellate body will take the position of the developing countries against the United States. So it means that Donald Trump has initiated a war against WTO, again because he believes it is not the fault of China to have this kind of deficit. It is the fault of the global or globalized movements which have permitted China to have this position. The second thing is reshoring. Reshoring is America first, so you want your companies to go back to the United States. So when you want to go back to the United States, you will create jobs in the United States, you will pay all the taxes in the US, etc., etc. So from the very beginning, he was asking companies to go back. Today, the result is the following one. According to the reshoring initiative, which is one institution which has been set in the United States in order to measure what is the number of companies going back and what is the number of jobs which have been created, we have close to 1,400 companies which announced to go back in 2018. This is the latest results that we have. And you can be sure that Donald Trump will use this in his election campaign because he will say this is a concrete result of my action. I am asking companies to go back, and they definitely came back. However, 145,000 jobs may be big for many countries in the world, but not for the United States. In the US, according to various estimates, they create about 3 million jobs per year. So 145 maybe is not very big, but of course he will not talk about the 3 million, he will talk about this in order to show how he delivered, how he was very efficient in delivering this. From the business point of view, if you are pulling out of China, you are not necessarily going back to the US. You will try to find another country where you will go in order to continue your business. So A.T. Kearney, a consultancy agency, has come up with this report, which is looking at where would American companies go if they are leaving China. So it's very interesting because they have identified a certain number of Asian countries. So according to this report, which is available on the net, it is free of use, very interesting to look at, there is one country which has benefited most, and this country is Vietnam. So this is where massively the American companies that decided to go out of China, this is where they are going to. There are many reasons for that. Among others, close to China. Second thing, their infrastructure from the legal point of view or from the physical point of view is very interesting. So this is why they don't hesitate to go to Vietnam. So currently, Trump is looking at this and he is not happy. So we can expect that very soon we will have taxes on Vietnam because he will not permit that you are pulling out of China just in order to find another country where you go to. He will prefer for you to go back to the United States. But if you are operating a company and if you are looking for, let's say, your cost structure, if you are looking for your profits, maybe the United States is not the first country you will go to. Maybe you're going to some others, especially if you are looking at the labor cost. So the labor cost has been analyzed by the Japanese. This is the Japan External Trade Organization, and they are giving you the comparative cost for different positions, manufacturing, non-manufacturing, manager, worker, etc. And they didn't put here the United States, it means that they are only putting the Asia-Pacific and adding Australia and New Zealand for that. And according to this, China is not among the cheapest ones. It is in the upper category. So it means that even if Donald Trump did not ask them to pull out of China, maybe they would do it by themselves, spontaneously. Because you know that the cost in China is increasing year after year, and for many of them, they could look at the opportunities which are given by the other countries. And Vietnam is also not among the cheapest ones. However, when we look at the combination of the labor cost and the infrastructure that you have there, the ease of doing business there, it is probably the best destination for the companies which want to leave China. The third one is decoupling. So decoupling is much more, I would say, much more hard to mitigate. Why so? Because if you are looking at reshoring, let's say that I'm moving my production unit to Vietnam, which is, I don't know, 200 kilometers away from my previous manufacturing unit in China. I'm going there. And let's say that after 5 years, things are changing. I can come back because it's not far away. I'm coming back to China. With decoupling, it's hard to come back. What does it mean? It means first that you are breaking the bilateral and the multilateral free trade agreements. So this happened when here in Southeast Asia or in Pacific, they wanted to implement the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And this Trans-Pacific Partnership was giving possibility to many countries to operate like in a free trade area. So he is pulling out of that. The second one that we have here is NAFTA, so it's not in Asia, but it's the same thing. And the last one is KORUS, which is with South Korea. So it means that Trump has this tendency to eliminate the free trade agreements, and in that case, he has full freedom how to deal with these countries. So that's one thing when we're looking at decoupling. The second one is when you are breaking the supply chains. On this graph, also coming from how much, so this is why I like this site very much. And you can see what the United States is buying from China and what China is buying from the United States. And you will find out that sometimes we have complementary elements and sometimes completely different points. So the US is massively buying electronic equipment or finished products which are coming from China. And China is buying something else. They're buying aircraft, they're buying soya beans, they're buying something else, sometimes chips also for the electronic industry. So if you have this kind of thing, and if you are saying you are decoupling, decoupling means the couple doesn't work anymore. So it's like a divorce. So it means you are not continuing with China from the American point of view, you are not continuing with the United States from the Chinese point of view. So if you don't trade with them anymore, you have to find alternatives to this. So how can the United States find an alternative to all this electronic equipment if they're not buying them from China? That would be very difficult, because sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to deal with the Japanese, with the Chinese. The second thing is when China is buying from the US, so here you have aircraft, usually it will be Boeing. So the alternative can be Airbus, but we have to see if it is a real alternative to that or not. So we can say that there is an alternative for the soya beans. You can go to another country in order to find them, but again, we have to see if it is available, what is the quality, what is the price, and so on. So it's not easy to decouple. However, this is something that they would like to do. And for many American companies, it is not easy. For instance, when Trump has decided to ban Huawei, he has said, you don't sell to Huawei anymore. Okay. But some companies in the US are dependent on China extremely. For instance, if you look at this company here, which is Qualcomm, Qualcomm is manufacturing chips for the industry, semiconductor chips. And for 67% of its sales, it depends on China. For this one, NVIDIA, 53. For Texas Instruments, 44. Intel, 42. So if you are telling them you don't sell to China anymore, can they find an alternative? That's practically impossible. So it means that they are extremely dependent on China, and few companies in China. And Huawei is one of them. Up to 2018, Huawei was buying from the United States on average for about $12 billion per year. $12 billion. So if you are Intel, or if you are Micron, or if you are Qualcomm, what will you do? You will go to see Trump, and you will tell Trump, look, if you continue with this, we can close the company. So not only there will be less jobs, etc., okay, but electronics is not only for the civilian use, it is also for the military use. So it means you won't have American production for the American army. You will have to buy to another country, and this will put a security threat on the United States. So this is how they're blackmailing a little bit Trump by saying, we have to continue to sell to the Chinese. Do you think that he accepted or not? What do you think? Yes, he is a businessman. So he has introduced exceptions. So this is the exception. The US Department of Commerce extends Huawei 90-day reprieve from third time. Reprieve means exception. So it means that the companies, so it is a little bit schizophrenic. On one side, you are establishing a ban on Huawei, and immediately you are giving exceptions to this ban. So for some companies, he's saying, okay, you can continue to sell to Huawei. This is for decoupling. And the last thing, I'm sorry, I have to go quickly for this. The last thing is bifurcation, and I will stop there. So bifurcation is different from decoupling. Decoupling just means China and US don't trade with each other. That's okay. But bifurcation means that you will systematically build standards which will be different, incompatible standards. So it means that you are pushing decoupling to its extreme by saying you will never go back to the couple again. So if you don't go back to the couple again, in that case you will have two completely different systems. So that's the objective of the bifurcation. And this is the biggest danger that we have, because once you have established parallel standards, it's very hard to go back to one common standard. And we used to have this between the Americans and the Soviets in the 50s and in the 60s, especially concerning the space race. At that time, the Soviets were better than the Americans, so this is why Kennedy has decided to go to the moon. But the Soviets were better, and the two systems were incompatible. So we have to wait the 70s and the 80s in order to build the common space station, which is called Mir, permitting them to go together. But up to that, it was completely separate, and they were living completely separate lives. So what China is saying today to the Americans, they are telling them, look, okay, you have America. First, make America great again. We don't have anything against this. However, if you are pushing us out, in that case, we have to build something autonomously. In that case, we have to build something which will be competitor to you. And when we build this, something which is competitor, we will go to see every country in the world, and we will tell them, now you choose. Either you take the American or you take the Chinese. That will be the danger, because you are recreating the Cold War. You are recreating a bipolar world where we have one system and when you have the other system. In order to show how China is very serious in this, they will use two things. The first one is to foster innovation, and the second one is to systematically build alternatives. So when China is fostering innovation, they're carefully choosing the most important element for them. And today it is artificial intelligence. And they're putting all their money in this field. So they have identified artificial intelligence, and they have also given goals: 2020 competitive, 2025 breakthroughs, 2030 to become the world leader. And when they decide to do something, they have the means in order to do it, because they're putting everything on the same track. It will be the university, it will be companies, it will be institutions. Everyone will work in the same direction. So they are telling the Americans, okay, you are doing your job, we are doing our job, and how can we show this, especially through the patents? Here you have the number of patents registered by the United States and China in two domains. One is artificial intelligence, and the other one is deep learning. And you can see that there was a like a bifurcation in 2015, and especially in 2016, when China is skyrocketing concerning the number of applications, of patents that they have there, while the United States is a little bit stagnating. And the latest expression of this comes from China Daily, which is the main daily in PRC, which says, nation, that is China, leads the world in applications for AI patents. So it means that we have a very interesting ecosystem in China, which has been set up in order to foster artificial intelligence, and we don't have this in any other country. So it means that they will be very much advanced. And today, if we have engineers, if we have, let's say, PhD students, and who are interested in artificial intelligence, the question is, will they go to MIT or will they go to Tsinghua? Probably they will go to Tsinghua, because this is where you will have the most investments and the most advanced artificial intelligence. For robotics, they will go somewhere else. But concerning artificial intelligence, maybe they will switch to the Chinese one. And the Chinese companies are very much present here, the bad companies, which is Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. So these three companies are leading it. Especially when we compare to Google, Google is the first American company which is present in artificial intelligence, but it is far away from the three Chinese partners that we have there. So I will not elaborate on all this because we don't have too much time on this. I will just focus on the last thing, which is building systematically alternatives. So these alternatives are very much present on the internet, and for that I will make a reference to another report. So the report is this one, the China Internet Report 2019, very interesting. Also download on the internet free of charge, etc. You will have information about what China is doing right now concerning the applications, and especially the fight with the American applications. The point that we have today is that China has built alternatives in all key verticals. On the right side, you have the American applications. On the left side, you have the Chinese applications. So it means that today, China is ready to fight frontally with the Americans, because Alibaba and Huawei will develop their own chips. Alibaba has developed Xiantier, and Huawei has developed Kirin 990, the chips which are made specifically for the 5G and artificial intelligence. And we don't have them in the United States. And Huawei has developed its own operational system. As you know, on your smartphones, we usually have two of them, iOS from Apple and Android from Google. But Huawei has developed its own OS Harmony, so it doesn't depend on Android, it doesn't depend on anything else. So now you will have a Huawei handphone, you will have Huawei chip, you will have Huawei operational system, and you will have all the Chinese applications on it. So it means that the Chinese smartphone is autonomous. It does not depend on Americans anymore. So this is the danger of the bifurcation. And if you don't depend on the Americans anymore, they will put pressure on the other countries. Now you have to choose. And they have asked the Prime Minister Li Xianlong, same thing in October, they asked him, now you have to choose. And he says, I don't want to choose. What will happen in the future is that everyone will have two smartphones. You will have the American one and you will have the Chinese one, if you want to communicate with everyone in the world. Otherwise, you will communicate with just one part. So you will have two smartphones, not only one for business and one private, but you will have one Chinese and you will have one American. Last thing is concerning the super apps. So the super apps is something that we don't have in the United States, where you are putting on one application an unlimited number of options. So you can put on WeChat, I don't know, taxi, food delivery, etc. So one example where the Chinese are very much in advance compared to the Americans is this example, which is coming from Tencent. So Tencent will have this WeChat, and they will build Tencent now into a bank. So they will build the Tencent credit score. So the Tencent credit score is around 5 variables here in order to identify your score when you are using WeChat. It means that they know everything about you. So they have all the different options which are connecting to you, people that you are talking to, the quantity of messages, the content of the messages, etc. So this is something that we don't have in the United States. We don't have this, for instance, for WhatsApp. We don't have this for anyone else. And they are looking at what is happening in China, and maybe they will be inspired by what is happening in China. As in conclusion, because we have to stop and I cannot speak anymore. So as a conclusion for this, I would say that for geopolitics, we can have two approaches. One is permanent. So this is the permanent competition or cooperation between states and corporations. And the second thing is one conjectural element, which is the biggest geopolitical issue today. Today it is the trade war between the United States and China. Everyone is saying that China will suffer from the trade war, but I'm a little bit cautious about that, because if we are pushing China to decoupling and especially bifurcation, in that case, I'm not so sure who is going to win at the end. So this is the conversation that we used to have in the classroom. And by the way, this is the classroom that we have for the executive MBA. We are sitting exactly in this classroom. So we have people on 3 sides, and everyone is participating. Do we have time for Q&A or not? Yes? So we have Mark. He will relieve me a little bit. Mark, it's up to you.
Thank you, Professor Cedomir Nestorovic. We'd like to just wrap up because we are running short of time. Thank you to our friends online who are attending this. I'm sure some of you may have questions. If you would like to ask some of your questions or get to know about the ESSEC and Mannheim Executive MBA Asia-Pacific, my name is Mark Neva, and some of our contact details will be available to you after the session if they aren't already. But thank you for joining us all the same, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we hope to hear from you soon.